Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became the heir of Themyscira and fought beside Wonder Woman. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air under the Takoba Municipal Bridge was cool and damp, thick with the smell of stagnant water and urban decay. It was a smell Izuku Midoriya had come to associate with defeat. He lay sprawled on his side, the rough concrete pressing a painful pattern into his cheek. The sharp, acrid scent of nitroglycerin still hung in the air, a ghost of the explosion that had sent his notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13, sailing into the murky water below. You know, if you really want to be a hero that badly, there's a quick way to do it. Katsuki Bakugo's voice was a low, cruel drawl. He loomed over Izuku, his two lackeys flanking him like gargoyles. The afternoon sun, filtering through the girders above, caught the arrogant smirk on his face. Believe you'll be born with a quirk in your next life, and take a swan dive off the roof of the building. The words struck Izuku with the force of a physical blow, stealing the breath from his lungs. It was a new low, even for Kaken. The usual taunts, quirkless, useless, Deku, were barbs he had grown callous to. They hurt, but they were familiar. This was different. This was a deeper, more venomous kind of cruelty. One of Bakugo's friends snickered. Yeah, maybe you'll come back as something useful. Like a rock. Izuku pushed himself up, his arms trembling. He wanted to shout, to scream that a hero would never say something so vile, but the words caught in his throat, choked by a wave of despair so profound it felt like drowning. Bakugo noticed the defiant glint in his tear-filled eyes. He took a step closer, his shadow falling over Izuku. What's that look for, huh, Deku? He shoved a hand into Izuku's shoulder, sending him stumbling back. You think you're better than me? You're nothing. You're not just quirkless, you're weak. You're so pathetic, you're not even a real man. That was the one. That was the insult that burrowed deeper than any other. In a society that equated power with worth, his lack of a quirk already made him less than. But Bakugo's words stripped him of something even more fundamental. They made him feel like an aberration, a failure not just of genetics, but of being. He watched them go, their laughter echoing off the concrete walls, a soundtrack to his humiliation. He stood there for a long time, the only sounds the distant rumble of traffic and the quiet plip-plip of water dripping from the bridge above. His shoulder ached. His heart felt like a lead weight in his chest. Slowly, mechanically, he trudged to the edge of the water, spotting the singed, waterlogged cover of his notebook floating amongst the grime. He used a discarded piece of wood to fish it out, cradling the ruined pages to his chest. It was just another Tuesday. He took the long way home, his feet dragging, his mind a maelstrom of Bakugo's words and his own self-doubt. Can I be a hero? Can someone without a power ever hope to stand beside giants like All Might? He was so lost in his thoughts that he didn't notice the commotion until he was right on top of it. A crowd had gathered at the mouth of a narrow shopping alley. An explosion rocked the street, followed by the terrified screams of civilians. Izuku's head snapped up, his ingrained hero-nerd instincts overriding his misery. A villain. A massive, amorphous creature made of green, viscous sludge was holding a hostage. The villain was a churning vortex of slime, its two malevolent eyes floating in the muck. And trapped within it, thrashing and clawing for air, was Katsuki Bakugo. Heroes were on the scene, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Backdraft, but they were helpless. Death Arms couldn't get a grip on the liquid body. Kamui's wood was ineffective against the villain's form and the fiery explosions erupting from its captive. Backdraft could only focus on containing the fires. The villain's too fluid, someone shouted. And that kid he's got, his quirk is powerful. It's making the villain stronger. Izuku's blood ran cold. Kaken. The boy who had just told him to kill himself was now suffocating, his own powerful quirk being used against him. Izuku saw the desperation in Bakugo's eyes, the panic, the sheer terror. It was a look he had never seen on his rival's face before. And then, their eyes met. For a single, heart-stopping second, across the chaos and the flames, Bakugo's terrified gaze locked onto Izuku's. It wasn't a look of arrogance or anger. It was a silent, desperate plea for help. Izuku's body moved before his brain could catch up. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have a quirk. He had a ruined notebook and a bright yellow backpack. He sprinted past the police line, ignoring the hero's shouts. His mind, the same one that cataloged hero stats and analyzed fighting styles, went into overdrive. Eyes. It has solid parts. Its eyes. He swung his backpack off his shoulders and hurled it with all his might. It soared through the air and struck the sludge villain square in its right eye. The monster recoiled with a gurgling roar, its grip loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Kaken! Izuku screamed, his hands clawing at the slime, trying to get a purchase, trying to pull his tormentor free. What the hell are you doing? Bakugo choked out, his voice a hoarse rasp. I don't know. Izuku sobbed, his fingers sinking into the disgusting ooze. My legs they just started moving. You looked like you were asking for help. The villain recovered its senses, its slimy form rising up like a tidal wave, ready to crash down and swallow them both. Izuku shielded his face, a primal scream building in his throat. This was it. He was going to die. A quirkless, useless Deku who tried to play hero. Suddenly, the sky seemed to darken. A shadow fell over them, swift and silent. A blur of red, blue, and gold shot past him. It was a woman. She moved with a preternatural grace that defied physics, a living bolt of lightning. She wore a gleaming golden tiara, her dark hair a stark contrast to her piercing, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. Before the villain could even react, a golden, glowing cord whipped through the air, seemingly an extension of her own will. It wrapped around the villain's amorphous body, constricting with an audible hum of power. The sludge monster writhed, but the golden lasso held it fast, tightening its grip until the villain was compressed into a single, manageable mass. With a final, powerful heave, the woman tore Bakugo from the villain's grasp and deposited him on the ground, where he lay gasping and coughing. She then swung the lasso, slamming the contained villain into the pavement with a sickening splat, knocking it unconscious. The entire encounter had lasted less than 5 seconds. Silence fell over the street, broken only by Bakugo's ragged breaths. The pro-heroes stared, dumbfounded. The crowd was speechless. Izuku was on his hands and knees, gaping at the woman who stood before him. She was radiant, exuding an aura of power and authority that made even All Might's presence seem different. Less bombastic, more ancient. Are you all right, child? She asked, her voice a melody, rich and clear. Her Japanese was perfect, yet carried an accent he couldn't place. Izuku could only nod, his mind struggling to process what he had just witnessed. Her quirk, what is it? Super speed? Super strength? The lasso, is it a support item? It seemed to glow with its own energy. It subdued a liquid form villain instantly. It must be some kind of energy nullification or molecular compression. And her movements, so fluid, like a dancer and a warrior combined. Who is she? She's not registered in any hero database I know. His muttering was cut short when her gaze sharpened. She took a step closer to him, her brow furrowed not with anger, but with a deep, unsettling curiosity. She knelt, her presence overwhelming, and gently took his wrist. Her touch was warm, but a strange energy seemed to hum from her fingertips. What is this? She whispered, more to herself than to him. Her eyes, a deep and knowing brown, stared at him as if she were peering directly into his soul. This energy, on you, it is faint, almost gone, but it is the blood of Themyscira. Before Izuku could ask what a Themyscira was, the press descended, their cameras flashing, their questions a barrage of noise. The mysterious woman straightened up, her expression becoming a mask of calm authority. She gave Izuku one last, lingering look before turning to the authorities, handing over the now bottled sludge villain with a few quiet words. By the time the chaos subsided and the other pro-heroes began taking credit, she had vanished as quickly as she had appeared. The walk home was a blur. Izuku was scolded by the pro-heroes for his recklessness, then praised for his bravery, a confusing mix of messages that left his head spinning. Bakugo had stalked off after a single, venomous glare, refusing to acknowledge what Izuku had done. None of it mattered. All Izuku could think about was the woman, the glowing lasso, and her strange, impossible words. The blood of Themyscira. He opened the door to his small apartment. "I'm home," he called out, his voice weak. "Izuku!" "Oh, thank goodness!" His mother, Inko Midoriya, rushed to the door, her face etched with worry. "I saw the news! The villain attack! They showed you running in. Oh, my baby! Are you hurt?" She fussed over him, checking for scrapes and bruises. Izuku allowed her to, his mind still miles away. "I'm okay, Mom. I'm fine." Suddenly there was a firm, polite knock on the apartment door. Inko froze. "Are you expecting someone?" Izuku shook his head. They rarely had visitors. Inko nervously smoothed her apron and opened the door a crack. On the other side stood the woman from the battle. She had changed out of her heroic attire and was now wearing a simple but elegant navy blue pantsuit. Her regal bearing, however, was unmistakable. "Good evening," the woman said, her voice calm and steady. "My name is Diana Prince. May I have a word with you and your son? It is a matter of great importance." Inko's eyes widened in recognition. Izuku's breath hitched. Diana's gaze flickered past Inko to him, and he saw that same intense curiosity again. I suppose," Inko stammered, intimidated by the woman's sheer presence. She opened the door wider. Diana stepped inside, her tall frame seeming to shrink the already small apartment. She moved with an impossible grace, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the all-might posters that papered Izuku's walls, the humble furniture, the scent of stir-fried vegetables lingering in the air. "Please sit," Inko said, gesturing towards their small dining table. She scurried to the kitchen to prepare tea, her hands trembling. Diana sat, her posture perfect, her hands folded on the table. She looked directly at Izuku. "You were very brave today, Izuku Midoriya. You possess the heart of a true hero." Izuku blushed to the roots of his hair, muttering a thank you. "But that is not why I am here," she continued, her tone shifting. "When I was near you, I felt something. A trace of old magic. The kind that runs in the veins of my people." Inko returned with a tray of tea, her movements stiff. She set the cups down with a clatter, avoiding Diana's gaze. "Mrs. Midoriya," Diana said, her voice gentle but firm. "I do not know how it is possible, but your son carries the bloodline of the Amazons." The teacups slipped from Inko's fingers, shattering on the floor. Her face went deathly pale. Her entire body began to shake. I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Diana's expression softened with something that looked like pity. She stood up and walked to the trembling woman. Then, she did something that shocked Izuku. She began to speak in a language he had never heard before, a tongue that sounded ancient and musical, like flowing water over smooth stones. "Orana, niece of Antiope," she said in the strange language. "Your exile is over. The world has need of us again. Hippolyta's blood runs in this boy. I can feel it." At the sound of those words, the facade Inko had maintained for 14 years crumbled into dust. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders racked with sobs that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. Izuku rushed to her side. Mom, what's going on? What is she saying?" Diana switched back to Japanese, her voice filled with a quiet authority. "Your mother is not Inko Midoriya. That is the name she chose in this world. Her true name is Orana, and she, like me, is an Amazon of Themyscira." Izuku stared, his mind refusing to comprehend the words. His mother? His kind, gentle, perpetually worried mother, was an Amazon? A mythical warrior woman? It was impossible. "It's true, Izuku," Inko, Orana, choked out, finally looking up. Her eyes, red and swollen with tears, held a history Izuku had never seen before. "Everything is true." She took a deep, shuddering breath and began to speak. The story she told was not one of quirks and heroes, but of gods and monsters, of ancient laws and a hidden island paradise. She had been Orana, a scholar and historian on the island of Themyscira, a place hidden from the world of men by the power of the Greek gods. She spoke of a society of immortal warrior women, living in peace and harmony. But she had always been curious, her heart yearning for the world she could only read about in their ancient texts. One day, a storm, divinely orchestrated, had battered their shores. A small vessel from man's world was shipwrecked, and a single survivor washed ashore, a young Japanese marine biologist named Hisashi Midoriya. He was kind, intelligent, and utterly fascinated by her. Against all law and tradition, she had nursed him back to health in a hidden cove. They fell in love, sharing stories of their two vastly different worlds. But their love was forbidden. Themyscira's greatest law was that no man may set foot on its shores. Furthermore, an ancient prophecy, long dismissed as myth, spoke of a dire future. When the god of war seeks to turn the world's gifts into a curse, a son of Themyscira, born in the world of men, shall serve as the bridge. When Orana discovered she was pregnant, she was terrified. A male child born of Amazonian blood was unheard of, a biological impossibility that the prophecy now made terrifyingly real. She knew that if she stayed, her child would be seen as an omen, a perversion of their law, and Hisashi would be condemned. So, they made a choice. With the help of a sympathetic Amazon sorceress, they fled the island, piercing the magical barrier just long enough to escape into the wider world. They settled in Japan, taking new names, building a new life. Hisashi had loved her, and their son fiercely. But his mortal life was fleeting. He had passed away from a sudden illness when Izuku was just a small child, leaving Orana, now Inko, to raise their son alone in a world that was not her own, praying her past would never find them. I was so scared. She wept, clutching Izuku's hand. I'm not a great warrior like Diana or my queen. I just wanted to protect you. When you were diagnosed as quirkless, a part of me was relieved. It meant you might go unnoticed. You could live a normal life. Izuku's head was spinning. His entire life, his entire identity, was a lie built to protect him. His father, the man he barely remembered, was a shipwrecked sailor who had fallen in love with a mythical warrior. His mother was that warrior. And he wasn't just quirkless. He was something else entirely, a bridge. A son of Themyscira. I am sorry to bring this sorrow to your door, Orana, Diana said, her voice filled with genuine empathy. But my arrival here was not by chance. I did not come seeking you. She turned her gaze to the window, looking out over the glittering lights of Muzurifu. I came because an ancient evil is stirring. Ares, the god of war, has been dormant for centuries, but this world, this society you have built, it is a feast for him. The constant, glorified conflict between heroes and villains, the fear, the anger, the struggle for power, it nourishes him. He is growing strong again. Her expression hardened. I have been tracking his influence across the globe. Minor incursions. Cults that worship him, conflicts that escalate with unnatural ferocity. Recently, the energy signatures led me here, to Japan. His minions, beasts of myth and legend, have been sighted, hunting. They were drawn here by a scent, a power they could recognize. She looked directly at Izuku. They were drawn to you. The attack by the sludge villain was not random. One of Ares' creatures was nearby, drawn to the chaos and, more specifically, to your unique bloodline, your heroic act, the surge of adrenaline and latent power. It was like a beacon in the dark. It is what allowed me to find you. It is also what has undoubtedly alerted our enemy to your precise location. As if on cue, a sound pierced the quiet night. It was a high-pitched, blood-curdling screech from above, like metal tearing and a vulture crying at the same time. The lights in the apartment flickered violently. The building groaned. Diana was on her feet in an instant, her entire demeanor changing. The calm diplomat vanished, replaced by a warrior of terrifying intensity. Orana, get back! Protect the boy! A deafening crash exploded from the living room window. Glass and wood sprayed across the room as a monstrous creature burst through the wall. It had the twisted, leathery body of an old woman, but with massive, filthy wings and razor-sharp talons where its feet should be. A harpy. Its eyes, small and black like beads of jet, fixed on Izuku with a predatory hunger. Orana screamed, instinctively throwing her body in front of Izuku, a mother's love overriding her long-dormant warrior instincts. The harpy shrieked again and dove, its talons extended, aiming straight for them. It never reached them. In a movement too fast for the eye to follow, Diana was there. She hadn't summoned her armor or her lasso, but she didn't need them. She met the creature's charge head-on. Her fist connected with the harpy's jaw with a sickening crunch. The beast was thrown backward, crashing into the far wall with enough force to crack the plaster. It staggered to its feet, spitting a glob of foul-smelling ichor, and charged again. Diana sidestepped the clumsy attack, grabbing one of its wings. With a powerful twist, she spun the creature around and hurled it back out the gaping hole it had created. It fell, screeching, into the street below. The apartment was a wreck. The wind howled through the shattered wall. Izuku and Inko were huddled together, trembling, covered in dust. Diana stood in the center of the room, breathing calmly, not a single hair out of place. The cold reality of the situation settled over them like a shroud. Their home, their sanctuary, was gone. They were exposed. They were being hunted. Diana turned to them, her face grim, her eyes blazing with resolve. The time for hiding was over. The time for choices had passed. "You are no longer safe here," she stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Ares knows of his existence. His hounds will not stop until they have him." She looked at Izuku, her gaze softening ever so slightly, seeing not just a target, but a boy with the heart of a hero caught between two worlds. "He cannot stay here. He must learn to defend himself. He must understand his heritage." She looked at the terrified, tear-streaked face of her fellow Amazon, Orana. "He must come with us," Diana declared, her voice ringing with the finality of a royal decree. "He must come home." The world had become a smear of wind and fractured light. One moment, Izuku was standing in the wreck of his life. The next he was being pulled onto the rooftop of his apartment building by Diana's impossibly strong hand. His mother, her face a mask of terror and tear-streaked resolve, was right behind him. The air on the roof was cold, biting with the late-night chill of Muzurifu. Below, the first sirens began their mournful wail, converging on the chaos they had left behind. "Where are we going?" Izuku managed to ask, his teeth chattering from a combination of cold and shock. Diana didn't answer with words. She raised her hand, and the very air in front of them began to shimmer, like heat haze on a summer road. The distortion coalesced, its edges sharpening until the vague outline of a vehicle took shape. It was utterly transparent, a ghost plane defined only by the way it bent the light of the city around its sleek, aerodynamic form. A ramp lowered from its belly, silent as a sigh. What is that?" Izuku breathed, his analytical mind struggling to find a category for what he was seeing. "Some kind of advanced light refraction quirk? A cloaking device based on metamaterials?" A faint, amused smile touched Diana's lips. "It is a gift from my people, Izuku. Come." She led them up the ramp into a cabin that was surprisingly solid and real. The interior was Spartan but elegant, with seats that seemed molded from a single piece of pearlescent white material. As the ramp retracted, the world outside vanished. There were no windows, only the soft, ambient glow of the cabin itself. A low hum vibrated through the floor, and Izuku felt a sensation not of movement, but of the world itself falling away from them. His mother, Orana, sank into one of the seats, her body trembling uncontrollably. The flight from her home, from her past, had been one of desperation and fear. This return journey was freighted with a heavier burden, the very life of her son. Izuku sat beside her, his own shock giving way to a frantic, nervous energy. He fumbled in the pocket of his tattered jacket, and pulled out the one thing he had managed to grab in the chaos: his waterlogged, slightly singed hero analysis notebook and a pen. He clicked it open to a fresh page, the motion as instinctive and comforting as breathing. "You have questions," Diana said, taking a seat opposite them. Her warrior's intensity had softened, replaced by the patient air of a teacher. Yes," Izuku stammered, his pen hovering over the page. "Everything. Themyscira. The Amazons. The gods. You said Ares, like the Greek god of war? They're real? And if they're real, does that mean all the myths are? Zeus? Hades? The Titans?" Diana nodded, her expression serene. "They are real. Not precisely as your myths describe them. Stories change with the telling, warped by mortal fear and fancy. But their power is very real. Long ago, Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, created a new race of mortals to be a beacon of hope and strength for mankind, the Amazons. My mother, Queen Hippolyta was the first. We were shaped from the clay of the earth and given life by the goddesses themselves. Strength from Demeter, wisdom from Athena, beauty from Aphrodite, a hunter's eye from Artemis, and sisterhood from Hestia. Izuku's pen flew across the paper, his clumsy sketches of Greek columns appearing next to frantic, scribbled notes. Created by gods. Not born? Biological makeup? Source of immortality? Divine energy infusion? Goddesses as source of quirks? We were tasked with guiding humanity towards peace, Diana continued, her voice taking on a somber tone. But my half-brother, Ares, grew jealous of creation. He sought to corrupt it, to turn mankind against itself and feed on the conflict. He ensnared and enslaved my people for a time. But with the help of the goddesses, my mother led a rebellion and broke us free. As a reward for our courage, and as a safe haven from the corrupting influence of man's world, we were given an island, hidden from all sight, where we could live in peace and guard against Ares' return. That island is Themyscira, Paradise Island, Izuku whispered, the name surfacing from some forgotten mythology lesson. To some, Diana agreed. To us, it is simply home. But my mom! Orana, she left, Izuku said, looking at his mother. She flinched at the use of her Amazon name, still a foreign sound on her son's tongue. Love can be a powerful, and sometimes foolish, motivation, Diana said gently, her gaze on Orana. Our most sacred law, born from the pain of Ares' betrayal, forbids men from setting foot on our shores. Your mother broke that law for your father. And in doing so, she believed she was protecting you from a prophecy she feared. The prophecy of the son of Themyscira. Izuku murmured, the words feeling heavy and strange in his mouth. Prophecies are treacherous things, Diana said. They are not a set path, but a map of possibilities. The oracle who spoke it did not see a curse, but a warning, and a hope. A hope that when the two worlds were in peril, a bridge could be formed between them. She looked at Izuku, her eyes seeming to weigh his very soul. It seems that time is now. The hum of the jet began to change, deepening in pitch. A soft chime echoed through the cabin. We are here, Diana announced. Izuku looked around, confused. There were still no windows. How can you tell? Diana smiled. Feel it. Izuku closed his eyes and concentrated. Beneath the vibration of the craft, there was something else. A subtle pressure against his skin, a thrumming in the air that felt ancient and alive. It was like the feeling of static before a lightning strike, but instead of being sharp and dangerous, it was warm, vital, and smelled faintly of sea salt and blooming flowers. The wall in front of them dissolved, becoming a perfect, crystal-clear window. Izuku's breath caught in his throat, his notebook forgotten in his lap. They were flying through a thick, swirling bank of mist that glowed with an internal, golden light. The mist parted before them as if acknowledging their passage, peeling away like a curtain drawing back on the grandest of stages. And beyond the mist was paradise. Themyscira rose from a sea of the most impossible, brilliant turquoise. It was an island of dramatic white cliffs, verdant green forests, and beaches of sand so white it hurt the eyes. Cascading waterfalls tumbled down mountainsides into crystal-clear lagoons. The architecture was breathtaking, a Hellenistic dream of white marble and gold. Graceful colonnades, open-air amphitheaters, and soaring temples were built in perfect harmony with the natural landscape, nestled amongst ancient olive groves and vibrant gardens. A city of breathtaking beauty, untouched by time, pollution, or war. The invisible jet banked, soaring towards a vast, natural harbor. As they descended, Izuku could see them, the Amazons. They were everywhere. Women practicing archery on the beach, their forms perfect, their arrows flying as one. Others sparred in open courtyards, the ring of bronze on bronze echoing in the clear air. Some rode magnificent white horses along the cliffs, their laughter carried on the wind. They were of all ages, all races, their faces etched with strength, wisdom, and a fierce, joyful vitality. This was his mother's world. This was, impossibly, his heritage. The jet came to a silent stop on a wide, marble platform overlooking the harbor. As the ramp lowered, the warm, fragrant air of the island rushed in to greet them. It was the cleanest air Izuku had ever breathed. But the welcome was not as warm. The moment they stepped onto the platform, a silence fell over the nearby training grounds. Dozens of pairs of eyes, sharp, intelligent, and wary, snapped towards them. Towards him. A murmur rippled through the assembled warriors. It started as a whisper, a collective intake of breath, and grew into a low, questioning rumble. Their gazes were like physical things, pressing in on Izuku from all sides. He saw shock, disbelief, and in the eyes of many, a cold, undisguised hostility. He instinctively shrank behind his mother, his face burning with a mixture of fear and shame. He was an intrusion. A flaw in their perfect world. A tall, formidable woman with fiery red hair braided down her back and armor of burnished bronze stepped forward, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. Her face was a mask of stern disbelief. "Princess Diana," she said, her voice sharp and clear, carrying across the platform. She bowed her head in respect, but her eyes never left Izuku. "What is the meaning of this? You have brought a man to our sacred shores." The word man was spoken like a curse. "Artemis," Diana greeted her, her tone even but firm. "This is Izuku Midoriya. He is the son of Orana, daughter of Antiope's line, who stands beside me." The revelation sent another shockwave through the crowd. Eyes shifted to Orana, who looked small and fragile under their intense scrutiny. Artemis's gaze narrowed, a flicker of recognition and old anger in her eyes. "Orana, the exile," she sneered. "So you return, and you bring your pollution with you. The law is absolute, princess. No man may set foot on Themyscira. He must be cast out. He is of our blood, Artemis," Diana countered, stepping forward to place a protective hand on Izuku's shoulder. "And he is in grave danger. The god of war hunts him. His fate, and ours, are now intertwined. The law does not bend for prophecy or convenience," Artemis retorted, her voice rising. "It is the foundation of our society." "Enough!" The voice cut through the tension like a blade. It was not loud, but it possessed an authority so absolute that it commanded instant silence. The Amazons parted, creating a path from the grand palace at the center of the city. Walking towards them was a woman who could only be the queen. She was tall and regal, with long, dark hair streaked with silver that was woven into an intricate crown of gold. She wore no armor, only simple white robes, but her presence was more formidable than any warrior on the island. Her face was beautiful, but it was a beauty forged by millennia of rule, etched with wisdom, strength, and a profound, weary sorrow. This was Queen Hippolyta. Her eyes, the same deep, intelligent brown as Diana's, swept over the scene. They rested for a moment on Diana, a flicker of maternal pride and concern. Then they moved to Orana. Orana fell to her knees, her head bowed. "My queen," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Hippolyta's expression was unreadable, a mask of stone. She stopped before her kneeling subject. "Orana," she said, her voice a low, dangerous calm. "You fled your home. You broke our most sacred law. You betrayed your sisters. And now you return, bringing the very thing our law was created to forbid." Her gaze finally fell upon Izuku. It was the most intimidating moment of his life. He felt utterly transparent, his every fear and insecurity laid bare before this ancient, powerful monarch. He felt the weight of her judgment, the judgment of an entire people, and it was crushing. "Mother," Diana said, stepping forward. "There is more you must know. The world is in peril. Ares, all will be explained in the throne room," Hippolyta commanded, her voice cutting her daughter off. She turned, her white robes sweeping across the marble. "Bring them." It was not a request. The royal palace was a wonder of open-air architecture. Sunlight streamed through massive colonnades, illuminating intricate mosaics that told the stories of Amazonian history. The throne room was not a dark, enclosed chamber, but a vast rotunda with a domed ceiling open to the sky. In the center, on a simple but elegant marble dais, sat a single golden throne. Hippolyta took her seat, flanked by her highest-ranking generals and advisors. Diana stood to one side, while Orana and a terrified Izuku were brought to the center of the floor. The chamber filled with Amazons, their silent, judging presence a palpable force. "Now, my daughter," Hippolyta said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "Tell me why I should not have this boy and his mother cast into the sea for this blasphemy. Diana recounted everything. Her investigation into Ares's growing influence, the energy signatures in Japan, the sludge villain, the discovery of Izuku's heritage, the attack by the harpy. She spoke with passion and conviction, her words painting a grim picture of the threat facing not just man's world, but Themyscira itself. Ares seeks a foothold, Diana concluded. And he believes he has found one in this boy's bloodline. To cast him out is to hand the god of war a weapon. Hippolyta listened, her expression unchanging. When Diana was finished, she turned her gaze back to Orana. And you? You knew of the prophecy. You knew what your child could represent, and you chose to hide, to cower in the world of men, and leave your sisters to face the darkness alone. I did it for love! Orana cried, finding her voice at last. She rose to her feet, tears streaming down her face, but her spine was straight. I loved Hisashi. And I loved my son! I did not want him to be born a prophecy, a symbol, a weapon. I wanted him to be a boy. To be happy and safe. Was that such a crime? It was a betrayal of your duty, Hippolyta said, her voice cold. My duty is to my son! Orana shot back, her maternal ferocity overriding her fear. A tense silence descended upon the hall. The queen was torn. Izuku could see it in the subtle clenching of her jaw, the conflict in her ancient eyes. She was caught between the inviolable word of the law and the desperate plea of a mother, between the traditions of the past and the existential threat of the future. There is only one who can bring clarity to this, Hippolyta declared, her voice regaining its regal composure. Menelip. Consult the oracle. An elderly Amazon, her face a roadmap of wrinkles and her eyes a startling, cloudy blue, stepped forward. She carried a simple bronze brazier, from which a thin tendril of scented smoke curled towards the open sky. This was Menelip, the high priestess and oracle of Themyscira. She knelt in the center of the room, lighting the herbs within the brazier. The smoke thickened, shimmering with an unnatural, ethereal light. Menelip began to chant in the ancient Amazonian tongue, her voice growing stronger, more resonant, until it seemed to come not just from her, but from the very stones of the palace. Her eyes rolled back in her head, becoming pure, milky white. The smoke swirled around her, coalescing into hazy, shifting images. Izuku could see glimpses of a burning city that looked like Tokyo, a towering figure of shadow and flame, and a flash of a familiar, heroic smile tinged with blood and exhaustion. Then, Menelip's voice boomed, no longer her own, but a chorus of voices speaking as one, echoing with the power of prophecy. The age of shadows returns, born of a gift turned to a curse. The god of war seeks his throne, in a world consumed by thirst. Thirst for power, for conflict, for a hero's righteous fight. He shall turn their greatest symbol into an avatar of night. The oracle convulsed, her back arching. Her voice became strained, more focused. But the fates have woven a new thread, of two worlds, intertwined. A son of Themyscira, a puzzle for the divine. Born in the world of men, with their weakness and their grace. He shall stand as the bridge when darkness finds its place. He shall not wield the warrior's might, nor the god's unyielding rage, but the selfless heart of a hero, and the mind of a battle sage. To unite the shield and the arrow, the old world and the new, for only together can they survive. When the final war is due, the smoke dissipated. Menelip collapsed, gasping, her eyes returning to their normal, clouded state. The hall was utterly silent, the weight of the oracle's words pressing down on everyone. Izuku stood frozen, his heart hammering against his ribs. The heart of a hero, the mind of a battle sage. It was everything he had ever aspired to be, and everything he felt he was not. He was Deku. Useless, quirkless. And now, a prophecy was pinning the fate of worlds on his shoulders. The irony was so immense it was nauseating. Hippolyta rose from her throne, her face a mixture of awe and profound burden. She looked at Izuku, and for the first time, she did not see an unlawful male, but the figure from the oracle's vision. The law and the prophecy are in conflict, she announced, her voice ringing with authority. The law demands his exile. The prophecy demands his presence. Such a conflict cannot be resolved by debate, nor ignored by faith. She descended the dais, her gaze sweeping over her warriors, over Diana, over Orana, and finally resting once more on Izuku. There is only one path forward. Themyscira does not suffer the unworthy. If this boy is to remain, if he is to be the bridge the fates have decreed, then he must prove he is worthy of the Amazon blood that flows, however diluted, in his veins." Her voice rose, becoming a formal declaration for all to hear. "He will not be treated as a prisoner, nor as an honored guest. He is a candidate. He will undergo the ancient trials of the Amazons. He will be tested in body, in mind, and in spirit. If he succeeds, he will have earned his place among us." A wave of shock and disbelief washed over the assembled Amazons. The trials were a crucible, designed to forge the mightiest of their warriors. For a boy, a weak, quirkless boy from man's world, to undertake them was unthinkable. It was a death sentence. Hippolyta raised her hand for silence. "If he proves worthy, he will be given a title unheard of in our entire history. A title that reflects his unique place in the prophecy." She looked directly into Izuku's wide, terrified eyes, her next words sealing his fate and setting the course for the future of two worlds. "He will be a candidate for the title of Prince of Themyscira." The Themysciran training grounds were a paradox of brutal reality set against breathtaking beauty. They were called the Ethelberg, the fields of noble strength. White marble arenas, worn smooth by millennia of sparring, sat nestled in meadows bursting with wildflowers. Archery ranges were carved into cliff faces overlooking the turquoise sea, the targets seeming to float against the endless blue horizon. The air was filled with the scent of salt and honeysuckle, constantly punctuated by the sharp ring of bronze on bronze, the thud of arrows hitting their mark, and the grunts of exertion from the island's immortal warriors. To Izuku Midoriya, it was the most terrifying place he had ever been. His training began the morning after the Queen's decree. He was placed under the joint tutelage of General Philippus, the highest-ranking military commander after the Queen, and Princess Diana. The contrast between his two mentors was stark. Philippus was a woman who seemed carved from the same ancient stone as the island itself. Her skin was dark, her hair was cropped short, and her muscles were corded with the strength of ages. She was the embodiment of Amazonian discipline. Her instruction was blunt, practical, and utterly without pity. Again, she would command, her voice a low baritone that tolerated no argument. Izuku, his arms trembling, would try to lift the Xiphos, a short, leaf-shaped practice sword made of blunted bronze. It felt impossibly heavy in his hands, designed for limbs with divine strength he did not possess. He would manage to raise it to shoulder height before his muscles screamed in protest, and he'd drop it with a pathetic clatter. Again, the first week was a symphony of failure. In the footraces along the beach, he was left hopelessly behind, his burning lungs and aching legs a testament to the gulf between his mortal physiology and their divine stamina. At the archery range, his arrows wobbled through the air, most failing to even reach the target, earning snickers from the younger Amazons. He was clumsy, weak, and constantly covered in a film of sweat, dirt, and shame. He was Deku all over again, but on a scale he could never have imagined. The scorn of the traditionalists was a constant, biting wind. Its primary source was Artemis, the fiery-haired captain of the guard. She made no secret of her contempt, often observing his training from a distance, her arms crossed, a perpetual sneer on her face. "Look at him," she would say to her companions, her voice carrying easily to Izuku's ears. "He flinches when the wind blows too hard. The Queen would have us believe this, boy, is our salvation. He weeps when he gets a splinter." Philippus could train a rock to fight better. Each word was a fresh cut, reopening the wounds Bakugo had carved into his soul for years. The old, familiar litany of self-doubt played on a loop in his head. "They're right. I'm useless. I don't belong here. I'm just a quirkless, weak Deku. I'm going to fail them all." Diana was his shield against this despair. Where Philippus focused on breaking down his body to rebuild it, Diana focused on his spirit. She would find him in the evenings, soaking his aching muscles in a hot spring, and sit beside him. "Do not listen to them, Izuku," she would say, her voice a soothing balm. "They see only what you are. I see what you can become. Their strength is a gift they were born with. Yours must be forged. That makes it no less real. In fact, it makes it more precious." She was demanding in her own way, but her teaching was infused with philosophy. When he struggled with a defensive stance, she wouldn't just correct his footing. She would explain the principle behind it. You are not a wall meant to absorb the blow, she'd tell him, adjusting his arm. You are a river. You do not stop the force, you guide it. You let its own momentum become its undoing. Let your body flow with the attack, not resist it. But it was in the quiet of his own small chamber in the palace that Izuku found his true weapon. His body was failing him, but his mind, honed by years of obsessive analysis, was working harder than ever. Each night, by the light of a softly glowing crystal, he would pull out a new notebook, a gift from his mother, its pages made of a thin, durable papyrus. Across the cover, he had written in neat, careful lettering, Amazonian analysis for the future, number 1. He filled its pages with a furious intensity. He didn't just lick his wounds, he catalogued them. He diagrammed the fighting stances of Philippus and Artemis, noting the subtle shifts in weight that preceded an attack. He sketched the different grips for a spear, calculating the optimal angles for thrusting and parrying. He broke down the physics of an arrow's flight, theorizing how humidity and wind from the sea affected its trajectory. He analyzed his own failures with a brutal, objective honesty. My center of gravity is too high when I try to block. It's why I'm always knocked off balance. Need to bend my knees, stay lower to the ground. Artemis always leads with a right feint before her main thrust. Her left foot plants a fraction of a second before she commits. That's the tell. That's the window. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. He was still the weakest, still the slowest, but he was no longer the most useless. His first taste of success came during a sparring session. He was pitted against a young Amazon named Io, a girl not much older than him who was strong, fast, and arrogant. She came at him with a whirlwind of attacks, expecting to bowl him over in seconds as usual. But this time, Izuku was ready. He didn't try to block her powerful strikes. He dodged. He weaved. He used the river principle Diana had taught him. He wasn't fighting her, he was letting her fight herself. His mind was a supercomputer, processing the data from his notebook. She overcommits on her lunges. Her balance is weak for a full half-second after a wide swing. Io swung her bronze practice sword in a heavy arc meant to shatter his guard. Instead of raising his own sword to meet it, Izuku dropped low, letting the blow whistle over his head. As she stumbled forward from the momentum of her own miss, he stuck out his foot. It was a simple, playground-level trip, but combined with her forward momentum and his perfect timing, it was devastatingly effective. Io yelped in surprise and went down in a heap. Silence fell over the training arena. Io lay on the ground, stunned and humiliated. Izuku stood over her, panting, his heart hammering in his chest. He hadn't landed a single blow. He hadn't overpowered her. He had simply analyzed, predicted, and used her own strength against her. Philippus, observing from the side, allowed a flicker of something that might have been approval to cross her face. Clever, she grunted. But cleverness will not save you when the ground offers no purchase for your tricks. Get up, Io. The boy got lucky, but it wasn't luck, and everyone there knew it. For the first time, the murmurs among the Amazons held not just scorn, but a grudging curiosity. The true turning point came several weeks later. His body had hardened, the calluses on his hands were thick, and he could now complete the morning run without collapsing. He was still leagues behind the others, but the gap was shrinking. Philippus had deemed him ready for the next stage of training, facing live, controlled threats in the labyrinth of Minas, a vast, magically contained training ground that housed a number of mythological beasts captured over the centuries. His group, consisting of himself and 2 other Amazons in training, were tasked with a simple objective: navigate from one end of a sector to the other. Their opponent was a young minotaur, bred in captivity and supposedly trained to subdue, not kill. The 2 Amazons, Lyra and Thea, were confident. They were fast and strong, working together with the seamless coordination of sisters. Izuku was tasked with staying back, observing, and providing support if needed, which everyone assumed he wouldn't be. The Minotaur was a terrifying sight, a hulking behemoth of muscle and fur with the head of a bull. It charged, and the 2 Amazons met it with a flurry of spears and shields. The battle was a dance of controlled violence. But the beast was craftier than they anticipated. It feinted a charge at Thea, then spun with surprising agility, its massive horn catching Lyra in the side. The blow wasn't lethal, but it was brutal. Lyra was thrown against the labyrinth wall, her leg buckling under her at an unnatural angle. She cried out in pain, her spear clattering to the ground. Thea rushed to her side, forming a defensive wall with her shield. They were cornered. The Minotaur snorted, pawing the ground, its bloodshot eyes fixed on the injured Amazon. It lowered its head, preparing for a final, crushing charge. Thea braced herself, knowing her shield wouldn't hold against a direct impact. In that moment, Izuku saw it all with a crystal clarity. He saw the terrified look in Lyra's eyes. He saw the Minotaur's muscles bunching, the trajectory of its charge. He saw Thea's grim acceptance of the inevitable. And it was the sludge villain all over again. His body moved before his brain could protest. He screamed, a raw, desperate sound, and sprinted forward, placing his small, unarmored body directly between the charging beast and the cornered Amazons. He raised his bronze practice shield, a flimsy thing that felt like paper. He knew it wouldn't stop the charge. He knew his bones would shatter. He knew he was going to die, but he also knew he couldn't just stand by and watch someone get hurt. It wasn't in his nature. He squeezed his eyes shut and braced for the impact. The crash was deafening. But it wasn't the sound of shattering bone he expected. It was a deep, resonant thud, like a giant hammer striking an anvil. A shockwave of force radiated through him, throwing him backward 10 feet, but it didn't break him. He landed hard, his body screaming in protest, every inch of him bruised and battered. But he was whole. He looked up, gasping for air. The Minotaur was staggering, shaking its massive head as if it had run into a stone wall. A strange, warm energy was coursing through Izuku's veins, a hum of power that started in his chest and spread to his limbs. The world seemed sharper, clearer. He could feel the vibrations of the Minotaur's steps through the soles of his sandals. He could see the individual beads of sweat on Thea's brow. The Minotaur roared in frustration and charged again, this time at him. Izuku's newfound instincts took over. He was no stronger, but he was faster. The world seemed to slow down just a fraction. He saw the dip of the beast's shoulder, the angle of its horns. He didn't run. He dove to the side at the last possible second, the tip of a horn grazing his tunic. As the beast thundered past, he scrambled to his feet, grabbed a loose stone from the ground, and hurled it at a series of hanging chains on the far wall, part of an old trap mechanism he had noted in his mental map of the arena. The stone struck its mark. The chains rattled, and a heavy net thick with bronze weights dropped from the ceiling, entangling the Minotaur. The beast thrashed and roared, but it was caught fast. Silence. Izuku stood, chest heaving, his entire body a canvas of pain. The strange energy humming within him began to fade, leaving behind an exhaustion so profound he could barely stand. Lyra and Thea stared at him, their mouths agape, their eyes wide with a mixture of shock, confusion, and something new, awe. He hadn't defeated the beast with strength. He had survived its charge through some unknown miracle and then trapped it with a combination of speed, observation, and quick thinking. Later that evening, Diana found him in the infirmary, his torso wrapped in bandages. Lyra and Thea had already been by, offering him quiet, sincere thanks. "What happened today, Izuku?" Diana asked, her voice soft. "What did you feel?" I don't know," he stammered. "It was like a fire woke up inside me. For a second, I wasn't slow. I wasn't weak. I just was." Diana placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "That was your heritage, Izuku. Your divine blood. A gift from the gods, passed down through your mother's line. It has been dormant your whole life, but the crucible of this island, the constant strain on your body and your will, has finally caused it to awaken." She explained that he would likely never have the same level of strength as she or the other full-blooded Amazons. His mortal half would always temper the divine. But he had inherited other gifts, enhanced durability, allowing him to withstand impacts that would kill a normal human. Heightened reflexes and senses, letting him perceive and react to the world at a faster level. And a deep well of stamina that, once he learned to control it, would allow him to fight on long after others had fallen. "Your power is not that of the spear, Izuku," she said, her eyes shining with pride. "It is the power of the shield. It is a power that protects. This revelation changed everything. His training was restructured. Diana took the lead, focusing on a unique combat style tailored to his specific abilities. It was a fluid, defensive art, based on parries, deflections, and using an opponent's momentum against them. It was a style built not for winning fights, but for surviving them, for controlling the flow of battle and creating openings for more powerful allies. They began to call it the Aegis style, after the legendary shield of Athena. Diana also began to instruct him in the deepest of Amazon philosophies, using her most sacred possession as a teaching tool, the lasso of Hestia. One afternoon, she took him to a secluded garden overlooking the sea. She uncoiled the golden lariat from her hip, its light seeming to pulse in time with her heartbeat. "You cannot wield it," she explained. "Its power can only be channeled by one with a pure Amazon heart, blessed by the goddesses. But you can learn its lesson." She held one end of the lasso, and offered the other to him. Hesitantly, Izuku took it. A wave of warmth and profound calm washed over him. He felt an overwhelming sense of peace, and a strange, empathetic connection to Diana, as if he could feel the deep well of compassion she held for all living things. "The world of men thinks it is a tool for interrogation, for forcing confessions," she said. "They are wrong. You cannot force truth. The lasso's power is not compulsion, but clarity. It strips away the lies we tell others, and more importantly, the lies we tell ourselves. It reveals the truth that is already there. To use it is not an act of aggression, but an act of empathy. You must be willing to understand the truth you are asking to see." He didn't know it then, but it was the most important lesson he would ever learn on the island. Months passed. The seasons on Themyscira were gentle, but Izuku's transformation was dramatic. He grew taller, his scrawny frame filling out with lean, hard-won muscle. His face lost its boyish softness, replaced by a quiet determination. He moved with a new confidence, a grace that came from knowing his own body and its limits. He was still no match for a true Amazon warrior in a head-to-head fight, but he had earned his place. The scorn had faded, replaced by a cautious, watchful respect. He was no longer just the boy from man's world. He was Izuku. Finally, the day of his first formal trial arrived. It was not a test of strength or combat, but of the mind. It was the crucible of Athena. He was brought before the high priestess of Athena, a stern, wizened Amazon named Callista. Artemis stood beside her, her expression as unreadable as ever, appointed as the trial's official observer. "Izuku Midoriya," Callista announced, her voice echoing in the marble hall of the temple. "You have been chosen to lead a squad of 2 warriors through the labyrinth of Phobos. Your objective is simple: retrieve the golden owl standard from the labyrinth's center and return. You will face traps, illusions, and tests designed to break your will and your team's cohesion. How you lead is as important as the result. Succeed, and you pass this trial. Fail, and your candidacy for the title of prince is over." His squad was waiting for him. It was Kasha and Theron, 2 powerful, headstrong warriors who still viewed him with deep skepticism. They saw his analytical approach as cowardice, his defensive style as weakness. "Just tell us which way to run and who to hit, boy," Kasha said, her hand resting on the pommel of her sword. "We'll handle the rest." Izuku's heart pounded in his chest, but he nodded, his face calm. He had spent the previous night studying the schematics of the labyrinth, memorizing every known trap and dead end. They entered the labyrinth. The heavy stone doors boomed shut behind them, plunging them into a disorienting twilight. The first test was a room of shifting walls, the stone blocks grinding and sliding to reconfigure the path, trying to separate them. Kasha and Theron wanted to charge through, to outrun the changes. "Wait!" Izuku commanded, his voice firm. He held up a hand. "There's a pattern. Watch the seams in the floor. The ones with the darker grout mark the paths of the walls." He had them wait, observe, and they navigated the complex maze without being separated once, moving during the brief pauses in the wall's movements. Kasha and Theron exchanged a surprised look. The next challenge was an illusion. A massive, terrifying gorgon appeared before them, its snake hair hissing, its gaze promising petrification. Theron raised her shield, Kasha drew her sword, preparing for a desperate fight. "It's not real," Izuku said, his voice steady. It looks real enough to me, Theron hissed. Look at the ground. Izuku pointed. It leaves no tracks. And its roar, listen. It's on a 5-second loop. He had noticed a faint repetition in the sound. It's meant to instill fear, to make us panic and run into a real trap. He walked forward, straight towards the monster. It roared, but its claws passed through him like smoke. He walked through it, and the illusion vanished. They finally reached the center, a large, circular chamber with a deep chasm bisecting it. On the far side, on a pedestal, was the golden owl standard. Between them and the prize was a series of narrow platforms connected by ropes. A test of agility, Kasha declared, preparing to cross. No, Izuku said, stopping her. He pointed to the base of the pedestal on the far side. That's a pressure plate. The moment the standard is lifted, these platforms will retract. Whoever takes it will be stranded, and the rest of us will fall. They were stumped. How could they retrieve the standard without stranding the retriever? Izuku looked around the room, his analytical gaze taking in every detail. The ropes, the heavy bronze shields on their backs. Their spears. I have a plan, he said. He laid it out quickly and clearly. Theron, the strongest, used her spear to brace herself against the wall, acting as an anchor. They tied their ropes together and looped them around her spear. Kasha, the most agile, crossed the chasm. Then, Izuku, using his own spear, crossed to the final platform just before the pedestal. Okay, Izuku called out. Kasha, on my mark, grab the standard. The platform will fall, but the rope will hold you. Theron, you have to hold her. I'm going to use my shield to jam the retraction mechanism for the main platforms, but it will only buy you a few seconds to pull her back. It was a risky, insane plan. But it was the only one they had. They looked at him, and for the first time, they nodded in complete trust. Now! Izuku yelled. Kasha snatched the owl. As predicted, the pedestal and her platform dropped away, leaving her dangling over the chasm, saved only by the rope. Theron grunted, digging in her heels, holding the line taut. The other platforms began to retract into the walls. Izuku, with a desperate shove, jammed his shield into the grinding gears of the mechanism, the metal groaning in protest. Pull! He screamed. With a mighty heave, Theron and Izuku dragged Kasha back across the chasm, her feet landing on the solid ground of the entrance just as Izuku's shield shattered into a dozen pieces. The mechanism, freed, slammed shut. The path was gone. They had the standard. They had succeeded. Kasha and Theron let out a whoop of victory. But their celebration died when they turned and saw Izuku. He was on the wrong side of the chasm, the last platform he stood on having retracted with the others. He was trapped. He had known this would happen. He had planned for it. He had sacrificed his own safe return to ensure the success of the mission and the safety of his team. He looked across the chasm at them and gave a small, tired smile. Go on, he said. Finish the trial. When Kasha and Theron emerged from the labyrinth, holding the golden standard, they were met by Callista and Artemis. You have the standard, but you are one short, the priestess noted, her voice devoid of emotion. Where is your leader? He is trapped, Kasha said, her voice heavy with a new respect. He sacrificed himself so we could succeed. So we could be safe. Artemis stared into the darkness of the labyrinth's entrance, her expression unreadable. She then turned and looked at the priestess. Callista nodded slowly, a faint, wise smile touching her lips. She looked at the two young warriors. And what have you learned? That a battle is not always won with the sword, Theron answered quietly. And that the strength of a leader is not in his own power, Kasha added, but in his ability to raise up those around him. The priestess raised her voice. The trial is complete. Izuku Midoriya has passed. From the shadows of the temple, a figure emerged. It was Izuku, covered in dust but unharmed. A secret passage, known only to the temple priestesses, had been opened for him the moment his team was safe. He walked towards his squamates. They looked at him, not with skepticism, but with genuine admiration. Kasha stepped forward and held out the golden owl standard to him. This belongs to you, Strategos, she said, using the ancient term for a respected general. Izuku looked at the standard, then at his team, and then at Artemis. The captain of the guard was still silent, but her posture had changed. The hostility was gone, replaced by a grudging, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement. He had not won with strength. He had not won with power. He had won with his mind, and with a hero's heart. And on the island of warrior women, that was a victory more profound than any other. He had earned his first measure of true respect. The respect Izuku had earned in the crucible of Athena was a fragile thing, a single flickering candle in a hall full of crosswinds. For every Amazon like Cassia or Thea who now saw him as a strategist, there was another who saw his victory not as a triumph of mind, but as a perversion of their ideals. A true Amazon, they argued, would have faced the challenges with strength and honor, not tricks and sacrifice. This sentiment found its voice in a formidable warrior named Euboea. Euboea was older than Artemis, her face a mask of stern lines, her silver-streaked black hair pulled back in a severe, practical braid. She was a respected traditionalist, a historian who had committed every Amazonian law and battle saga to memory. She had seen centuries come and go, and her worldview was forged in the ancient betrayal by Heracles and the deep-seated belief that the world of men was a source of chaos, corruption, and pain. To Euboea, Izuku was not a bridge, he was a breach. She began her campaign not with open hostility, but with the far more dangerous weapon of political maneuvering. In the Grand Agora, the open-air forum where Amazonian policy was debated, she spoke with a passion that swayed many. "Sisters!" she called out, her voice ringing across the white marble amphitheater. A significant crowd had gathered to listen, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. Izuku watched from the shadowed colonnade at the top, feeling like a defendant at his own trial. "For 3,000 years, we have lived in peace, shielded from the madness of man's world by our laws and our faith in the gods. Our most sacred law, born from the blood and tears of our enslaved foremothers, is that no man shall set foot upon our shores. It is a law of survival. A law of purity." She pointed a dramatic, accusing finger in the direction Izuku was hiding. "And now, that law lies shattered, not by an invader, not by an enemy, but by a prophecy we barely understand and a boy who embodies everything we have fought to keep at bay. We are told he is of our blood. But look at him. He is weak, he is mortal, he is male. He fights with cleverness because he lacks strength. He strategizes because he lacks courage. He is a child of the world that despises and fears us, and we are asked to name him prince." A murmur of agreement rippled through a portion of the crowd. Euboea pressed her advantage. "The prophecy speaks of a bridge. But bridges, my sisters, can be crossed in two directions. If we allow him to be our link to that world, we are inviting its chaos, its conflict, its inherent instability, back into our home. Is this boy truly our salvation, or is he the key that will unlock our doom?" Her words were insidious, preying on deep-seated fears. Diana and Philippus argued against her, speaking of the prophecy's hope and Izuku's proven heart, but Euboea's rhetoric was potent. She began to subtly sabotage Izuku's standing. Rumors spread that he had cheated in his trial, that the priestesses of Athena had shown him favor. During group training exercises, squads led by Euboea's acolytes would refuse to follow his strategic suggestions, leading to failures that were then blamed on his ineffective leadership. Izuku felt the pressure mounting. It was a different kind of battle, one of whispers and sideways glances, and it was in many ways more draining than any physical contest. He retreated further into his studies, his analysis, trying to prove his worth through diligence. But he knew it wasn't enough. A schism was forming in the heart of Themyscira, and he was the fault line. While the political fires smoldered in the Agora, Diana was preoccupied with a more immediate, and far more sinister threat. She took Izuku with her to the Temple of the Fates, a secluded, quiet place at the island's highest peak. Inside, nestled in a grotto open to the sky, was the Oracle's pool. It was not a grand fountain, but a simple, circular basin of black, mirror-smooth water, fed by a spring that was said to bubble up from the very roots of the world. "The pool allows us to scry," Diana explained, her voice low and reverent. "To see glimpses of the world beyond our shores. It is not a precise art. The visions are often fragmented, guided by the current's focus and the currents of fate. I wish to see what Ares is doing to your home." She knelt beside the pool and touched the surface of the water. It did not ripple. Instead, the blackness seemed to deepen, and a faint, milky light began to glow from within. Diana closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. Images began to form on the water's surface, hazy and indistinct at first, then sharpening into horrifying clarity. Izuku knelt beside her, watching, his breath caught in his throat. He saw a nighttime street in a district he recognized as Kamino. A pro-hero he knew, the grappling hero, Slide and Go, was locked in battle with a group of villains. But the fight was wrong. The villains weren't just trying to escape or steal something. They moved with a chilling, synchronized brutality. They used flanking maneuvers, focused their attacks on the hero's known weak spots, and fought with a suicidal ferocity. They weren't criminals, they were soldiers. Slide and Go was overwhelmed, his arm broken, his body pinned under a relentless, coordinated assault. The vision shimmered and vanished. Another took its place. A daytime attack in a crowded shopping mall. An explosion, but not the chaotic, attention-grabbing blast of a common villain. This one was precise, targeted. It took out a structural support pillar, causing a section of the upper floor to collapse, creating a kill zone and sowing maximum panic. The heroes on the scene were so busy with rescue and crowd control that they were easy targets for the villains who emerged from the smoke, armed with weapons that glowed with a faint, angry red light. "They're using military tactics," Izuku whispered, his blood running cold. His analytical mind stripped the scene of its heroism and saw it for what it was, a series of tactical engagements. Suppression, ambush, psychological warfare. This isn't about crime. This is an insurgency. It is his handiwork. Diana confirmed, her voice a low growl of fury. Ares does not just inspire violence. He revels in the strategy of it. He is teaching them. Arming them. Turning petty criminals into a disciplined army of fanatics. The final vision was the most disturbing. The surface of the pool showed the face of a man Izuku did not recognize. He was handsome in a cruel sort of way, with a scarred face and eyes that burned with a bitter, resentful fire. He wore the tattered remnants of a pro-hero costume, but it was scorched and blackened. He knelt before a shadowy, indistinct figure that radiated an aura of immense power and malice. A glowing, jagged spear was offered to him, and as the man took it, his face contorted in a mixture of agony and ecstasy. A wave of dark, violent energy washed over him, and his eyes began to glow with the same malevolent red as the villain's weapons. "What was that?" Izuku asked, his voice trembling. "A consecration," Diana said grimly, pulling her hand from the water. The images faded, the pool returning to its placid blackness. "Ares is not content with an army of foot soldiers. He is choosing a champion, a disgraced hero, it seems. Someone with power, training, and a heart full of hatred for the society that cast him out. He is pouring his divine power into a mortal vessel." She stood, her form silhouetted against the sky, a statue of righteous anger. "This is his pattern. He finds the cracks in a society, the resentment, the greed, the lust for power, and he pours his influence into them until they shatter. He is turning the very concept of your hero's society, the constant, public conflict, into his personal forge. And he is about to create his masterpiece." The weight of their mission settled on Izuku with a crushing finality. This was no longer just about his own place on Themyscira. The whispers of war from man's world were becoming a deafening roar. The news from the Oracle's pool, combined with Eubia's escalating dissent, forced Queen Hippolyta's hand. But before any grand decisions could be made, there was the matter of Izuku's own readiness. Diana had argued that if he was to face the dangers of the outside world, he could not go unprepared. His shattered bracer was a testament to both his bravery and his vulnerability. He was sent not to the temple or the throne room, but to the heart of the island's mountain, to the great forge. The forge was a cavernous space, a cathedral of stone and fire. The air was hot and thick with the smell of hot metal, coal, and ozone. Rivers of molten bronze flowed in channels carved into the floor. The rhythmic, percussive clang of hammers on anvils echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings, a constant, powerful heartbeat. This was where the weapons and armor of the Amazons were born, a place of creation as sacred as any temple. The forge master was an ancient Amazon named Acantha. She was shorter than most of her sisters, but her body was a solid block of muscle, her arms thick as tree trunks. Her face, framed by a wild mane of graying hair, was kind, but her eyes held the sharp, appraising glint of a master craftsman. "So," she said, her voice a low rumble, as Izuku entered her domain. She wiped a hand across her sweaty brow, leaving a streak of soot. "The strategos. General Philippus speaks of your cleverness, Princess Diana speaks of your heart, and Eubea speaks of your weakness. I care for none of those things. I care only about the quality of the material. Let me see the damage." Izuku nervously presented the shattered bracer. Acantha took it, her callous fingers surprisingly gentle as she examined the cracks in the divine metal. A catastrophic kinetic force overload," she diagnosed, her eyes narrowing. "You used it to shield others from an explosion. Foolish. But effective." She tapped the largest crack with a fingernail. "The design is simple. A solid block of Olympian bronze, meant to repel. But you are not a repeller, are you, boy? Your style is to redirect. To deflect. To disperse. This design is wrong for you. It is like giving a rapier to a man who fights with a hammer." She tossed the broken piece onto a scrap heap. "We will make you a new pair. And this time, you will have a hand in the design." For the next 3 days, Izuku did not train in the fields, he studied in the forge. Acantha became his newest, and most unexpected, mentor. She taught him about the properties of their metals, about channeling heat, about the sacred geometry of runes that imbued their creations with divine properties. In turn, Izuku gave her his mind. He didn't know how to swing a hammer, but he knew physics. He drew schematics in the soot on the floor, using his knowledge from his world to supplement her ancient craft. "Instead of a single, solid piece," he explained, pointing to his drawing, "what if we use multiple, overlapping layers? Like tectonic plates. The outer layer takes the initial impact, but it's designed to shift slightly, dispersing the kinetic energy laterally across the surface area." Acantha grunted, studying his design. "The energy must go somewhere. It will shatter the inner layers, not if we carve runes of channeling between the layers," Izuku countered, his excitement growing. "Instead of runes of pure warding, we use runes of redirection. The bracers wouldn't just block the force, they would absorb it, channel it through the layers, and then vent it harmlessly out the sides. It would be an active defense system." A flicker of genuine interest sparked in Acantha's eyes. "A clever thought. It will be incredibly difficult to balance the runes. One miscalculation and the energy will feed back and shatter the user's arm." "I can do the calculations," Izuku said without hesitation, and so they worked. Acantha and her smiths hammered and shaped the glowing bronze, their blows raining down in a perfect, thunderous rhythm. Izuku, meanwhile, sat at a stone table, surrounded by wax tablets, frantically sketching designs and calculating the complex runic arrays. He was in his element, the familiar joy of analysis and problem-solving filling him with a confidence he rarely felt on the sparring fields. He was contributing, using his unique skills to create something new, something that was a perfect fusion of his world's science and this island's magic. On the 3rd day, it was done. Acantha presented him with 2 gauntlets. They were more than just bracers, extending further down his forearms and protecting the back of his hands. They were masterpieces of their craft. The bronze was polished to a dark, mirror sheen, inlaid with fine, silver-glowing runes that pulsed with a quiet, contained power. They were lighter than his old one, yet felt infinitely stronger. He slid his arms into them. The metal was cool against his skin, and they seemed to mold to his form as if they had been made for him. He instinctively clenched his fists, and the overlapping plates shifted with a soft, satisfying shing. "Go on," Acantha urged. "Test them." She picked up a massive, 2-handed forging hammer and, with a mighty heave, swung it directly at Izuku's outstretched arm. Izuku flinched on instinct, but held his ground, raising his new gauntlet to meet the blow. The impact was immense. But instead of a jarring crash, there was a deep, resonant VMMP. The silver runes on the bracer flared with a brilliant white light. Izuku felt the force of the blow hit the outer plate, but instead of crushing his arm, it felt slippery. The energy washed over the surface of the gauntlet, flowing through the intricate channels he had designed. For a split second, he felt a powerful thrumming up his arm, and then 2 arcs of white energy vented harmlessly from the sides of the bracer, dissipating into the air with a sound like tearing silk. His arm hadn't even been jolted. He stared, wide-eyed, at his arm, then at Acantha, who was looking at the gauntlet with a rare, approving smile. "They are not the bracelets of submission, which our law dictates for all Amazons," she said. "They are a new creation, born of 2 worlds. You wish for a shield, boy. These are not a shield, they are an aegis." Izuku looked at the bracers of aegis, his first true piece of heroic gear, forged by his own mind and the hands of his newfound people. For the first time, he felt truly armed. Armed with his new gauntlets and the grim knowledge from the Oracle's pool, Izuku was summoned with Diana to the throne room. The chamber was quiet, the usual crowd of observers absent. It was just them and Queen Hippolyta, who sat on her throne, her expression heavy with the burden of leadership. "My daughter has shown me the visions from the pool," Hippolyta began, her voice echoing in the silence. "The hand of Ares moves unchecked in the world of men. At the same time, Euboea and her followers sow dissent within our own walls, weakening us from within." She looked down at Izuku, her gaze intense. "Your trial in the labyrinth proved the quality of your mind. Your actions in the forge prove your worth is not limited to theory, but the prophecy states you are to be a bridge. A bridge cannot be built from only one shore. You have learned our ways, our strengths. But you have forgotten the world you are destined to save." She rose from her throne, her presence filling the room. "I have made a decision. Your training here can go no further until you have context for what you are training for. You must see the war that is brewing with your own eyes. You must understand the people, the heroes, the very society that Ares seeks to corrupt." She turned to Diana. "You will take him back to Japan. It will be a reconnaissance mission. Gather intelligence. Assess the strength of Ares' forces. Identify his champion, and determine how we may best aid them when the time comes. But you are to observe only. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. The world is not yet ready for the return of the Amazons." Izuku's heart leaped into his throat. Go back? Back to Japan, to the world of quirks and heroes he had both loved and been rejected by. He was terrified. He was exhilarated. "I understand, my queen," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. He bowed his head. "I will not fail," Hippolyta nodded. "See that you do not. The fate of more than just your own life rests upon your shoulders now, Izuku Midoriya. It is a heavy burden. I pray you are strong enough to carry it." As they turned to leave, to make their final preparations, they found their path blocked. Artemis stood at the entrance to the throne room, her arms crossed, her expression a thundercloud. She had been waiting for them. "My queen, a word," she said, her voice tight with disapproval. She did not wait for permission. "You cannot be serious. You would send him into the field? He is a liability. His sentimentality will be a weakness. He is untrained in the true horrors of war. He will get the princess killed." "I have more faith in him than you do, it seems, Artemis," Hippolyta replied coolly. "Faith is not a strategy." Artemis shot back, her discipline cracking for a moment. She turned her glare on Izuku. "Man's world will chew him up and spit him out. He is not ready, and sitting here, hiding behind our walls, will make him ready?" Diana interjected, stepping to Izuku's side. "He has proven himself, Artemis. When will you see past your prejudice?" Artemis held Diana's gaze for a long, tense moment before letting out a frustrated sigh. She knew she was defeated. She gave a stiff, formal bow to the queen and stalked out of the throne room without another word. Later that evening, as Izuku and Diana stood on the marble platform where the invisible jet waited, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Artemis standing there, alone, silhouetted against the setting sun. She walked towards him, her movements silent and purposeful. She stopped a few feet away, her eyes scanning him from head to toe, taking in the new bracers, the determined set of his jaw, and the fear he could not completely hide. "Do not think that because you completed one trial and helped build a new toy that you are one of us," she said, her voice low and sharp. "You have not bled for this island. You have not mourned a sister fallen in battle. You do not know what it means to be an Amazon." Izuku said nothing, merely meeting her gaze. Artemis reached behind her back and unslung her quiver. From it she drew a single arrow. It was a perfect thing, fletched with the feather of a Themysciran eagle, its shaft carved from a single piece of unbendable olive wood, its bronze tip honed to a razor's edge. It hummed with a faint, latent power. She held it out to him, not as a gift, but as a challenge. Themyscira does not gift its weapons to outsiders, she said, her voice cold as steel. Consider this a debt. You carry with you the honor of our people. This arrow is a reminder of that burden. You are to use it only when you have no other choice, and if you use it, it had better be for a cause worthy of the life of the Amazon who forged it. Izuku hesitated, then reached out and took the arrow. It was perfectly balanced, its weight a solemn promise in his hand. Do not fail to repay this debt with honor, Artemis finished. Her words were a threat, a warning. But as Izuku looked into her fierce, unyielding eyes, he saw something else beneath the anger. It was not trust, not yet. It was not acceptance. But it was the first, grudging acknowledgement of a shared purpose. It was the faintest glimmer of respect. She turned without another word and walked away, a crimson-haired sentinel fading into the twilight. Izuku stood on the platform, the bracers of Aegis on his arms, a single, perfect arrow in his hand. He looked back at the gleaming marble city of his ancestors, then turned and boarded the jet, his gaze fixed on the horizon, on the darkening skies that led back to the world of men. The whispers of war were waiting for him. The journey back was a silent reversal of the first. The invisible jet sliced through the clouds, leaving the impossible turquoise of Themyscira's waters for the hazy, industrialized skies of modern Japan. Izuku sat strapped into his seat, the strange, comforting hum of the craft a stark contrast to the frantic hammering of his own heart. He was returning to the world that had discarded him, but he was no longer the boy who had left it. The thin, callous skin on his hands, the web of faint scars on his arms from training mishaps, and the quiet weight of the Aegis bracers clasped around his wrists were testaments to a transformation that was more than just physical. "You are quiet, Izuku," Diana said from the seat beside him. She was dressed not in her heroic armor, but in a simple, practical traveler's outfit of dark pants and a fitted jacket. It did little to hide the coiled strength in her posture. "Just thinking," Izuku replied, his gaze fixed on the bulkhead as if he could see through it to the world below. "It feels strange. For months, all I've wanted was to prove I belong on Themyscira. Now that I'm finally starting to, we're leaving. Themyscira is our fortress, not our cage," Diana said softly. "Our duty has always been to the world, even when the world has forgotten us. This mission is the ultimate expression of your training. It is your first true test as strategos." Izuku ran a thumb over the cool, smooth metal of his bracers. Hephaestus himself had repaired and reinforced them after the Minotaur incident, the divine metal now gleaming with a faint, inner light. They felt solid, real. A comforting weight. But they also felt like a terrible responsibility. "What if I'm not ready?" he whispered, the old fear, the ghost of Deku, rearing its head. Analyzing training drills is one thing. A real battle, with people's lives on the line. Diana reached over and placed her hand on his shoulder. Her touch was firm, reassuring. "The most important part of any strategy, Izuku, is to know your own strengths. You are not a spear. You are not expected to be the one who breaks the enemy line. You are the mind that guides the spear's tip. You are the shield that protects its wielder. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. And trust me." He looked at her, at the unwavering confidence and compassion in her ancient eyes, and felt his own fear recede, replaced by a fragile, burgeoning resolve. He nodded. "I'll try." The jet descended into the urban sprawl of Hosu. The change in atmosphere was immediate and jarring. The pure, life-giving air of Themyscira was replaced by a familiar miasma of exhaust fumes, street food, and the low-level hum of a million lives lived in close proximity. The silence of Paradise Island gave way to a cacophony of traffic, advertisements, and distant sirens. This was his home. And it felt utterly alien. They disembarked in a deserted industrial park on the outskirts of the city, the invisible jet cloaking itself once more before ascending back into the smoggy sky, a silent guardian angel waiting for their call. Diana had arranged for credentials and currency, allowing them to move through the city as ordinary civilians. But there was nothing ordinary about Hosu. The air was thick with a tension that went beyond the usual urban bustle. There were more police patrols than he remembered, their expressions grim. Pro-heroes were a common sight, but they seemed on edge, their usual crowd-pleasing waves and smiles replaced by sharp, scanning gazes. The news tickers on the sides of buildings spoke of a surge in villain activity, of attacks that were more violent, more coordinated, and more brazen than ever before. As they walked through a crowded plaza, Izuku saw the pro-hero, Manuel, directing a team of sidekicks. A year ago, Izuku would have been vibrating with excitement, his notebook already out, furiously scribbling notes on Manuel's water-based quirk. Now, he saw the scene through the critical lens of an Amazonian strategist. His formation is too loose, Izuku thought, his eyes narrowing. He's got his team spread out for maximum public visibility, not for tactical advantage. Their lines of sight are poor. A coordinated attack from two sides would collapse their perimeter in seconds. They're projecting confidence, but they're vulnerable. Philippus would have them running drills until they dropped for such a sloppy display. The realization was a cold shock. He was no longer just a fan. He was an analyst. The hero worship that had defined his entire life was being replaced by a pragmatic, and somewhat disillusioning, assessment of strengths and weaknesses. He looked at the heroes posing for selfies with civilians, at the garish merchandise being sold in shop windows, and for the first time, he saw the cracks in the system he had idolized. He saw the pageantry, the commercialism, the focus on rankings and popularity. On Themyscira, strength was for protection, for duty. Here, it was a commodity. A brand. It is different, seeing it through new eyes, isn't it? Diana murmured, noticing his troubled expression. They're not ready, Izuku said, his voice low. They're preparing for a performance, not a war. Then it is our duty to ensure they do not have to face one alone, she replied. Diana's divine senses, which she described as a kind of spiritual attunement, were their guide. She was searching for a discordant note in the symphony of the city, a festering energy that felt of rust and old blood, the signature of Ares. It led them away from the bustling commercial centers and into the city's shadowed underbelly, a labyrinth of narrow alleyways, decaying warehouses, and forgotten industrial zones. Here, the tension was of a different sort. It was the quiet, watchful fear of people who lived outside the bright spotlight of the top-ranked heroes. They passed the makeshift shrine where someone had left flowers for a shopkeeper killed in a recent villain attack. They overheard hushed conversations about a new gang, more brutal and reckless than any before, who fought with a terrifying, almost religious fervor. They call themselves the Warhounds, a nervous vendor told them as Diana purchased 2 bowls of ramen from his street stall. They don't steal much. They just break things. People. They fight like cornered animals, screaming about the glory of battle. The energy Diana was tracking grew stronger, pulling them towards a derelict shipping yard near the bay. The place was a graveyard of rusted containers and crumbling concrete, the air thick with the smell of brine and decay. It was the perfect place for a hidden army to fester. They are here, Diana confirmed, her eyes scanning the area. The taint of Ares is thick, like a sickness in the air. We can't just charge in, Izuku insisted, his training kicking in. We don't know their numbers, their quirks, or the layout of the area. I need to do reconnaissance. Diana nodded, her trust in his judgment absolute. Be swift. Be silent. You are a shadow, Izuku. Do not be seen. Using the skills he'd learned from the Amazonian scouts, Izuku moved through the shipyard like a ghost. His small, unassuming frame, once a source of shame, was now his greatest asset. He slipped through gaps in fences, scurried over piles of debris, and used the deep shadows of the stacked shipping containers for cover. His senses, heightened by his awakened blood, picked up every detail, the scrape of a boot on gravel, the low murmur of voices, the unnatural, coppery scent of the divine weapons. He found them in a massive, dilapidated warehouse at the center of the yard. Crouching on the rusted roof of an adjacent building, he peered through a grimy skylight. Inside, there were at least a dozen of them. They fit the vendor's description perfectly. They were a motley crew, men and women with the hard, resentful eyes of those the world had left behind. But there was a frenzied, feverish light in their expressions, and they were all armed. Their weapons were crude but deadly, axes, spears, spiked clubs, and they all pulsed with a faint, malevolent red glow. This was the blessing of Ares. Izuku's analytical mind went to work, his gaze darting from one figure to another, cataloging, assessing. Man with the axe, quirk appears to be minor keratin manipulation. His fingernails are long and sharp. The axe blade is coated in the same material, but it's glowing. Ares's power must be amplifying his quirk, making the blade unnaturally durable. Woman with 2 daggers, extremely twitchy movements, some kind of minor speed enhancement quirk. The daggers seem to shimmer, probably enchanted to be faster, sharper. Their fighting style is disorganized, all aggression, no defense. They rely on overwhelming their opponents with pure ferocity. Berserkers. His attention was drawn to the center of the room. A man, clearly the leader, stood on a makeshift platform. He was larger than the others, his body a roadmap of crude tattoos and old scars. He wielded a heavy, jagged spear that glowed more intensely than the other weapons. But what made Izuku's blood run cold was the sight of a man kneeling before him, bound and gagged. A local dockworker, judging by his uniform, his face bruised and bleeding. This world of false heroes and their hollow peace has made you weak, the leader roared, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. His followers cheered, their voices a hungry bang. They offer you fame, merchandise, a comfortable life. But our God, the great Ares, offers you true power. He offers you purpose. The glory of eternal conflict. He pointed the tip of his glowing spear at the captive. The age of symbols is over. The age of warriors is at hand. We will start by cleansing this city of the sheep who follow them. He was going to execute the man, right there, as a sacrifice to his dark god. Izuku's heart slammed against his ribs. There was no more time for planning. He scrambled back from the skylight and raced back to Diana's position, his mind a whirlwind of tactics and terror. 12 of them. He gasped, sliding to a halt behind a stack of concrete pipes where Diana waited. Plus a leader. They have a hostage, they're about to kill him. Their quirks are minor, but amplified by Ares's power. They fight with no self-preservation. Pure offense. Then a direct assault is the only option, Diana said, her expression hardening. No, wait, Izuku said, holding up a hand. They're expecting a hero to come through the front door. We can use that. The warehouse has large loading bay doors on the north and south sides. You go in through the north. Draw their attention. Be the spear. I'll circle around and come in through the south. My job is to get the hostage out. Once he's clear, I can support you. He was talking fast, adrenaline sharpening his thoughts. The leader is the main threat. His spear seems to be the source of his authority. The others, they're like a pack. Cut off the head of the snake, and the body will flounder. Diana looked at him, a flicker of pride in her eyes. He wasn't just her student anymore. He was her partner. A sound strategy, strategos. Let us begin. With a nod, they separated. Izuku's heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs as he sprinted around the perimeter of the warehouse. This was real. Not a drill. Not a test. Real people, real danger. The river doesn't stop the force. It guides it. Diana's words echoed in his mind. He heard the crash from the other side of the building, a sound like thunder and splintering steel. Diana had made her entrance. He reached the southern loading door and risked a peek inside. It was a scene of breathtaking, terrifying chaos. Diana was a tempest of divine retribution. She moved through the warhounds like a dancer through a field of wheat. Her fists were blurs, her kicks were lightning strikes. She wasn't using her lasso yet, wanting to keep its true nature a secret for as long as possible. She disarmed a man with an axe, shattered the spear of another, and sent a third flying into a stack of crates with an effortless push. The warhounds charged her, screaming their devotion to Ares, but their attacks, while ferocious, were clumsy. They might as well have been children striking a mountain, but there were too many of them. Their berserker rage meant they felt no pain. A man with a broken arm kept coming, trying to claw at her with his good hand. Another she threw across the room was already staggering back to his feet, a bloody grin on his face. They were a tide of fanatical violence, and even Diana could not be everywhere at once. She was a force of nature, yes, but they were a flood, threatening to bog her down, to drown her in sheer numbers. This was his chance. While all eyes were on the goddess in their midst, Izuku slipped inside, a shadow hugging the wall. The hostage was still kneeling on the platform, wide-eyed with terror. The leader was barking orders, trying to coordinate the attack on Diana. Izuku moved. He was fast, silent, his senses screaming with input. He vaulted over a stack of pallets, slid behind a rusty piece of machinery, and came up behind the platform, completely unseen. With a few quick, practiced motions, he sliced through the man's ropes with a small utility knife and pulled the gag from his mouth. "Go!" Izuku whispered urgently, pointing towards the door he'd come through. "Run! Don't stop!" The man, dazed but grateful, scrambled away into the shadows. Objective 1 complete. Now for Objective 2. Support. "Focus your fire!" the leader roared, finally noticing the hostage was gone. His furious gaze swept the room and locked onto Izuku, who was now moving into the open. "You! The boy! Kill him!" Two of the warhounds broke off from the main brawl and charged at Izuku. One was a large, brutish man with a spiked club, the other was the woman with the daggers and the speed quirk. Izuku's training slammed into the forefront of his mind. He didn't run. He stood his ground, dropping into the low, balanced aegis stance Diana had taught him. The man with the club swung first, a heavy, overhead blow meant to crush him into the concrete. Too slow. Overcommitted. Izuku didn't block. He moved inside the man's reach, letting the club whistle past his ear. As he did, he slammed the heel of his palm into the man's elbow joint. It wasn't a powerful strike, but it was perfectly placed. The man grunted in pain, his arm going numb, and the club fell from his grasp. Before he could recover, the woman was on him. She was a blur of motion, her enchanted daggers slicing the air where he had been a split second before. He couldn't match her speed, so he wouldn't try. He backed away, his aegis bracers held up, deflecting her frantic stabs. The daggers scraped against the divine metal with a screech of tortured steel, sparks flying with each impact. Linear attacks, his mind supplied? Predictable. He continued to give ground, deliberately luring her towards a narrow space between two towering stacks of metal shelving. She followed, seeing it as a chance to corner him. The moment she entered the confined space, her greatest asset, her speed, was nullified. She couldn't dodge or weave. Izuku stopped his retreat, planted his feet, and when she lunged one last time, he caught her wrists, using his bracers to trap her blades. He used her own forward momentum to spin her around and slam her back first into the metal shelves. The shelves wobbled, and a cascade of heavy, rusted machine parts tumbled down, burying her in a pile of junk. He had taken down two quirk-enhanced, divinely armed villains without throwing a single punch. "Diana!" he yelled, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "The leader! His spear is a conduit. I think he's channeling the other's aggression. It's making them stronger." It was a theory, a wild guess based on the pulsing light of the weapon and the way the pack seemed to feed on the chaos. But his instincts screamed it was right. Diana, who was locked in a struggle with four berserkers, heard him. Her eyes flashed with understanding. She stomped her foot, the impact sending a shockwave through the concrete floor that staggered her opponents. In that brief moment, she broke free and launched herself towards the leader. The leader met her charge, his glowing spear clashing against her bracers in an explosion of red and gold light. The impact shook the entire warehouse. He was strong, far stronger than the others, his body coursing with the raw power of the god of war. While they fought, the other warhounds, momentarily freed from Diana's assault, turned their attention to the next available target, Izuku. 5 of them charged him at once. He knew instantly he couldn't fight them. His victory against the first 2 had been based on strategy and terrain. In an open space, against 5 enraged opponents, he stood no chance. So he ran, not in fear but with purpose. He sprinted towards the edge of the warehouse, towards the loading docks where civilians were now beginning to peek out from their hiding places, drawn by the commotion. One of the villains, a woman who could spit a weak, acidic slime, took aim at a small family cowering behind a car. Izuku saw the attack coming. He didn't hesitate. He changed direction, putting himself in the path of the glob of acid. He crossed his arms in front of his face, the Aegis bracers taking the full impact. The acid sizzled and dissolved against the divine metal, completely harmless. Another villain, enraged, hurled his glowing axe not at Izuku, but at the car the family was hiding behind. The axe struck the vehicle's fuel tank. A split second later, the car exploded in a brilliant, terrifying fireball. The force of the blast threw Izuku off his feet. Shrapnel and fire rained down. He looked over and saw the family, a mother and her 2 small children, frozen in terror, directly in the path of the collapsing, burning wreckage of the car. There was no time to think. Only time to act. He scrambled to his feet and threw himself over them, curling his body into a protective ball. He held his Aegis bracers above his head, trying to form as wide a shield as he could. The world became a storm of heat and noise. The burning chassis of the car slammed down onto his back. An unbearable, crushing weight descended on him, and 1,000 points of agony erupted across his body. He felt a rib crack. The heat was searing, blistering his exposed skin, but the bracers held. They glowed with a brilliant white light, absorbing the worst of the kinetic energy, deflecting the lethal shrapnel. He grit his teeth, a scream of pure agony tearing from his throat, but he did not move. He held his ground. He was the shield. He would not break. Beneath him, the family was untouched, safe in the small pocket of space his body had created. The pain cleared his mind, focusing it to a single point of clarity. Through the roaring of the flames, he could see the battle between Diana and the leader reaching its climax. Diana was stronger, but the leader was relentless, fueled by the carnage around him. He was feeding on the explosion, on the fear of the civilians, on Izuku's own pain. "Stop fighting to destroy," a voice that sounded like Diana's echoed in his memory. "Fight to protect." They weren't just feeding the war. They were losing it. From the other side of the warehouse, Diana saw what had happened. She saw Izuku's selfless act of heroism. She saw the flames, she heard his scream, and a cold, divine fury rose in her. The time for restraint was over. With a flick of her wrist, the lasso of Hestia flew from her hip, a cord of pure, golden truth. It wrapped around the leader's spear, and with a single, powerful tug, she ripped the weapon from his grasp. The effect was instantaneous. The red glow of the spear died, and a psychic shockwave erupted from it. Across the warehouse, the warhounds screamed as if in pain, the frenzied light in their eyes flickering out. The divine power, the borrowed rage of Ares, vanished, leaving them dazed, confused, and suddenly very aware of their own injuries. The fight was over. The leader, deprived of his power, stared at the now ordinary spear in Diana's hands, then at her, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. "This changes nothing!" he spat, his voice filled with venom. He began to back away towards a dark, open doorway. "My master's plan is already in motion. He is preparing his true champion, a warrior who will make you look like a child. He will burn this city to the ground, and from its ashes, a new age of war will rise." Diana took a step to pursue him, but he was too quick. He hurled a small, dark object at the ground. It exploded with a blinding flash of light and a cloud of thick, black smoke. By the time the smoke cleared, he was gone. The first wail of approaching sirens cut through the sudden silence. Diana rushed to the burning wreckage. "Izuku!" She tore the flaming chassis off him with a single hand and threw it aside. Izuku lay in the dirt, groaning, his back a mess of burns and bruises. He was alive. He pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest. "The family," he coughed, his throat raw from smoke. "They are safe, thanks to you," Diana said, helping him to his feet. She looked at him, at his injuries, at the unwavering resolve in his eyes, and her heart swelled with a fierce, profound pride. Izuku looked down at his arms. His left Aegis bracer was intact, though scorched and blackened. But the right one, the one that had taken the brunt of the car's impact, was shattered. A massive crack ran through the divine metal, spiderwebbing across its surface. It pulsed with a weak, flickering light spent. He had held the line. He had been the shield. But it had cost him. He looked around at the defeated villains being rounded up by the first arriving heroes, at the frightened but safe civilians, at the destruction they had wrought. He was shaken to his very core, every nerve ending frayed, every muscle aching with a pain he had never known. The reality of a true battle was far more terrifying than any training exercise. But as he looked at the grateful faces of the children he had saved, he felt something else, too. A quiet, burning certainty deep in his soul. He had made a difference. He had protected people. He had looked into the face of overwhelming odds and had not flinched from his duty. He was shaken. But he was resolute. The war was just beginning, and for the first time in his life, he knew, without a single shred of doubt, that he was ready to fight it.